Good morning, everyone. A big welcome to our latest Posturite webinar, Coaching in Action. What role does it play in neurodiversity and mental health support? It's always great to know who's with us. Everyone's saying hello in the chat, which is always great to know where everyone's joining us from. I'm joining from it was a sunny Chester, but it's just started raining. So I hope that's not a sign of things to come over the next few days as we tip into September. But hope everyone is well, and thank you for joining us this morning. My name's Andy Rigby. I'm one of the enablement leads here at Posturite. Our enablement team works with organisations all over the world, helping with neurodiversity and disability assessments, workplace adjustments, and access to work support. Just so you do know, today's session is being recorded. You'll be able to catch up with it afterwards on our website at posturite.co.uk/webinars. It will also be emailed out to you tomorrow with our follow-up email where while you're there, you can also find a whole library of past webinars covering everything from DSC and ergonomics, ADHD, autism, mental health, and many, many more. If anything we talk about today sparks a question, or if you'd like to know more about our enablement services, please feel free to reach out. You can email the team at enablement@posturite.co.uk or contact me directly at andyrigby@posturite.co.uk. It'll be great to hear from you. In terms of getting involved this morning, which is a big part of how we do run our webinars, is we do love it when you guys engage with us. If you've got any questions during the webinar, pop them in the Q&A box. So not the chat box as it is now. If it can go in the Q&A box, that way everyone can see them and even vote on the ones you'd most like us to put to the panel. That said, please do use the chat box as well. It's always great to see people sharing ideas and encouraging each other along the way. We've already had some brilliant questions sent in ahead of today by email. So thanks to those of you that have sent questions in. We'll get through as many as we can. If we don't manage to cover yours live, we'll follow up with an email afterwards. If you do find the chat distracting, a lot of people do jump on these webinars and it's great and people do use the chat. But if you do find it distracting, which is a little bit of feedback we had from one of our last webinars, which was very active, you can disable the notifications. If you click on the More tab and choose Chat, notifications off, or you can do this via the Settings tab and switch the notifications off the chat. That will stop the pings coming through and allow you to listen with no distractions. And finally, stick with me, a quick accessibility note. Zoom has a live captioning option which you can turn on or off in your account settings under the Meetings tab. Just look for automated captions. And so, to our webinar. We're often asked about workplace strategy coaching. We get a lot of questions around workplace strategy coaching with a lot of organizations that we do help. What it involves, the value it brings, and what actually happens in the session. So we thought the best way to respond is to actually give it the focus that it deserves and run a webinar. So here we are. We are joined for the first section by workplace strategy coach Victoria Burns. Victoria holds master's degrees in coaching psychology and in philosophy and literature. She's been coaching for 4 years and has particular passion and skills for coaching people who are neurodistinct. She now has over 1,000 hours of experience supporting clients working in finance, heritage, healthcare, law, and government. In her earlier career in the arts and heritage sector, she managed teams to deliver cultural programs and strategies. Victoria, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Hi, Andy. Thanks so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And hello, everyone.
Thank you very much. Yeah, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself to start and what your background is and what led you to workplace strategy coaching.
Yeah, sure. So I've got my own story into this. As you said, I've got a background in working in heritage and culture and the arts and and a lot of that work involves sort of social engagement and community engagement processes. So in about 2017, I became interested in in leadership, but also in different approaches to learning, self-directed learning, and problem solving. So my hunch was that coaching or methodologies around coaching had something, there was something in that. So I signed up for a master's course at University of London, and during that time, actually I didn't sign up. First of all, I signed up for a postgraduate diploma. And I found it really triggering, and it reminded me of a lot of experience I'd had at school and throughout my education. Feeling that I was working very hard to sort of get my words onto paper and so on. Although I love writing, I love reading. Anyway, during the course, I also had, as part of the coaching psychology, I had my own coaching sessions, and during that, I was describing some of the feelings I was having and the struggles I was having. My coach, who wasn't necessarily at that point a coach who worked with people who were neuro distinct, but she challenged me to find out what this thing was that I kept sort of alluding to. And then so she drew a circle and said, "What is this?" And I said, "I think I'm dyslexic." So this was, I had never come to this before. I'd never sort of given it a name. So I went to the DSA services at the university, and it's interesting because a lot of universities do mop up what hasn't been discovered in schools. And of course, it came up in big flashing lights that I was dyslexic. So that was the moment I kind of, I guess some people on this call have had the same experiences. You start sort of reassessing your past and then thinking what that means for you, and then looking at the strategies to help yourself go forward. And then it occurred to me that coaching was actually an ideal intervention for people who are neurodifferent, neurodistinct, because what coaching does is it's self-directed learning. It focuses very much on the individual and assumes that they are an expert in their own lives. So, we have these big terms, dyslexia, ADHD, ASD, but they manifest completely differently in each individual. So coaching assumes that the individual is an expert in their own lives and that they are the best people to work out their own solutions and strategies to address their challenges. So that's the point where I got interested in coaching and enablement coaching for people who are neurodistinct.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So it is a fascinating, it's a huge subject, and it is really fascinating. I think it's an area where the more you delve into it, the more interesting that this is, isn't it? And the more maybe questions that people have. So there are people that may not have heard of workplace strategy coaching before, or certainly not gone through the process. So you have touched on it there. But what exactly is workplace strategy coaching?
Yeah. Well, I think, and a lot of the questions are also, what's the difference between coaching, mentoring, and sort of more therapeutic interventions like counselling? So I think the first thing to say is there are fuzzy edges between all three. So and then how the coaching appears will also often depend on the client. But in terms of enablement coaching, it's solutions focused, it's problem solving, it's about raising the individual's self-awareness, because when you become self-aware, you're kind of freed from the impulses you have to do things in certain ways, and you can make decisions to do them in different ways. So I think one of the crucial thing is also in the workplace is enabling people to thrive and survive, or survive and thrive. So it's developing strategies for working, looking at the way they organize their work, very, very practical things, looking at, procrastination, breaking that down, working out what that's all about. It's very tailored to the individual. So like I say, people will present very differently. I might find out a client has dyslexia or ADHD, but each one will be very, very different. Their circumstances will be different. Their personalities will be different. Their abilities in different areas will be very different. So really, the initial sessions are finding out what those are. So we work on two sort of levels. There's the very, very practical, supporting them to look at we have huge amounts of technology now where they can use the emotional impacts of their diagnosis. I've just got a note that my internet's unstable. Are you still hearing me okay?
Yeah, I didn't know whether it was mine or yours. Sorry, but yeah, we're back now.
So we look at how anxiety and stress might be affecting people's performance at work. And the reason why that's important is because anxiety and stress shuts down executive functions. And executive functions are things like working memory, impulse control, all the things that are already quite challenged with people who are neurodistinct potentially. And then what happens is you get into this vicious cycle of having challenges with your working memory or your impulse control because you're anxious. And because you're anxious, it affects even more impactfully your executive functioning. So alongside, both very, very practical ways of adapting in the workplace and adapting your ways of working at work, we look at the more sort of emotional triggers and find out ways of addressing and dealing with some of those.
Yeah, a lot in there. It's great to understand a little bit more, and also to try and help people sort of evaluate themselves, which I've mentioned on a few webinars in the past, is something that, it's a fast-paced life we live, and actually taking time out to evaluate yourself and how you function, and the areas where you people may need a little bit of additional support is quite difficult to do on your own, isn't it? So having somebody there that understands that those kind of things then does bring that out of you. You mentioned right at the start that actually the person that is best to work out yourself is yourself. You just may need those prompts along the way, and coaching in any walk of life can do that kind of, the best sports teams have coaches, the best players have coaches, and that's exactly what it's there for. I imagine a very rewarding role. And there must be parts that you enjoy the most, and likewise any parts of the role that you do find quite challenging.
Yeah, it is hugely rewarding because you are providing a space for people to work stuff out that they haven't had an opportunity to do so. And it's a safe space, it's an encouraging space. My coaching is, generally, I think this coaching in this space is very much strengths-based, because the thing that people don't see, because we have this deficit model of all these things, it's what you don't have. And that's right from the beginning, and through experience of school and the way we're taught, it focuses on what you can't do, what you're not doing right. So by the time you're an adult, it's very much embedded, this feeling of a lot of feelings around self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence. So we spend a lot of time looking at strengths, and people around you might see them, but the last person to see strengths often is the individual who's challenged with their neuro difference. So I think one of the most rewarding things is seeing somebody really having a kind of aha moment, or the penny drops, and they go, God, I am good at that. This is what I am bringing to the office. This is what I do bring to my work. And often they are things that are associated with their challenges. Like, so, people with ADHD might provide sort of energy and big picture thinking. The same with people with dyslexia, because they're thinking a bit differently. They might be lateral thinkers. They've had to, by default, find different ways of working from very, very early on in their lives. So I think the moments when they go, yeah, gosh, I'm all right. You don't have to think I'm brilliant, but you go, yeah, I'm all right. And this is what I bring to the office. And this is what I bring to my team. And this is what I'm good at. So I think those are the great moments. And then also, I think when because the coaching intervention is time bounded, if I think knowing that you've given people skills to meet their challenges going forward, I think that's a great, very rewarding. What else is good? Yeah, feeling that people are better able to advocate, communicate their needs in their teams. That's also great. Challenges can be, the flip side to that. Sometimes, people can speak their strengths, but you can feel they're not quite believing it. But then you've got to get to those little moments where they kind of feel they might just about seen that and work on that. Other challenges, people come with sort of expectations about what coaching might be. So, we can't wave a magic wand and make them not dyslexic. So that's a way of kind of managing expectations, but also leaning into strengths. So, and I think other challenges are maybe if they're in a workplace where they're not quite as welcoming of neurodiversity within their teams, that can be difficult. So we'll work on, you know, how to advocate, how to communicate, hopefully maybe get a co-coaching session so we can start, you know, supporting them to communicate within their teams and then with their line managers about what their needs are.
Great. We'll touch on the co-coaching sessions, I think, in a little bit more detail. We already had a question about line manager. I think that's really interesting in terms of the strengths and challenges conversation. We ran a session last week, Dave and I, who's speaking shortly on ADHD, and we had a discussion around where it lends itself, where the characteristics of ADHD will help you excel, and obviously there's question around the traits of the individual, but the areas where an individual may excel in that area, and even we did have comments to say, well, you know, this and there were people talking about the challenges that they face, and it's probably a human nature thing, isn't it, that it's natural that people do tend to go towards there and sometimes not give themselves the credit that they deserve in the areas. So yeah, they're really powerful sessions. We touched on neurodiversity, and we speak about neurodiversity on a daily basis. But any other areas when we spoke previously around the sort of menopause and mental health, where that may lend itself towards strategy coaching, and there's absolutely value of coaching in these areas as well, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think mental health, chronic illnesses, things that you're having to manage on a day-to-day basis, because all of these require solutions. I mean, if you're not, you know, the thing about counselling, it's not necessarily focusing on how you cope in the present. You've got to hold on to your job. You've got to keep going. So sometimes you'll find that clients will have both more sort of therapeutic interventions and coaching. But that might be happening in their personal lives, but they've come to a coach to help. How am I going to make sure I can get through this day? How can I make sure I'm with my challenges, that I'm going to be able to function in the best possible way? Because, and I think we touched on, Andy, when we were chatting about how, you know, feeling that you're coping and you're managing and you're achieving in your workplace will then have an impact on your mental health just by default, because you're still up and running. And yes, so yeah, I think any sort of hidden disabilities, visible disabilities, things that are, you know, if you're still able to come into the workplace, you still need some support to function on a day-to-day level.
And we've touched on strengths there, so the benefits of coaching, and we speak about the benefits of what that will have on the individual, but there's also an impact on the wider team, that an individual may work in a wider team and a wider the whole organization, isn't there? There's real benefits that don't just stop with the individual. The impact that has is wider, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are all working within teams, within communities, within different ecosystems. So I think one of the first thing is to sort of raise your own self-awareness so you can advocate for yourself. So once you understand yourself and you say, well, look, this is what I need in order to do my best work. And then you're able to communicate that to your line manager and the rest, and to tell your team, this is, well, you know, it could be really simple things like, I prefer it if you put things in writing in bullet points, you know, so it's function, you know, how you communicate your needs to others in your team. But in order to do that, you need to be self-aware. So, you know, coaching is working at both those levels. So it's sort of understanding yourself and then advocating and communicating to the rest of your team. And I've got different tools for that. I have a thing called the Manual of Me. And sometimes teams adopt them for everybody in the team. So it's not just the people who've got, you know, who are neurodistinct or think on, yeah, their ways of working are a bit different from other people's, but the whole team does them. So it's a kind of a way of team bonding, team understanding. So yeah, there's that. There's I think we're going to touch on co-coaching, but yeah, I think mostly advocating and communicating, understanding how your particular ways of working impact other people at work. So that's an important one. So maybe you can moderate your own behavior in order to get the best out of other people, particularly if you're a manager. So we're, you know, how your ways of managing people might be impacted by your neurodifference, once you become self-aware of that, or aware of that, you can moderate how you communicate with other people, and also becoming aware that probably in your team, if there's going to be other people who've got, things going on, differences in ways they work and think.
That's great. In terms of that first session, because it can be potentially quite sort of overwhelming, really, or an individual may not know what to expect. So what can people expect from that first session? If they're booked in for a coaching session, it's coming up this afternoon, what can people expect?
Yeah, so I think I won't know an awful lot about you, and you won't know an awful lot about me. So really, it's about getting to know each other. Setting up some trust, some understanding that this is a safe environment. Acknowledging what's shared with your line manager or your organisation and what's not. Nothing sensitive is shared beyond that space. It's a space that's between me and the client. So it's establishing that, enabling them to ask any questions about the process, because people will come with preconceptions, and really working out the best way we'll work together, what the challenges are for the client, and then establishing one of the key things I ask is what change would you like to see during the process of our coaching sessions? So what are the differences you'd like to see by the end? And they'll very often be and that's called the contracting stage. So these are the things that we'll work on. These are the things we'll work towards. And those might change as we go along, and then we'll acknowledge that if and when that happens. So we will set sort of goals at the beginning, and that will be, often they're very practical, and then more often not, there will be issues about, I want to feel better about myself, I want to feel less anxious in these situations. So we'll build all that in, and we'll sort of set a plan. They also come with different, so then I may only have 2 or 3 sessions. So depending on how much time we have, I might focus in very quickly on some very practical things that I can see might help, or suggest them, depending on the context for the client. So yeah, that initial session really is, finding out the best ways of working together, the most impactful, and what the priorities are.
Fantastic. And we've touched a couple of times on the fact that, and we do a lot on the webinars around the sort of no one size fits all approach, and a coaching session for an individual that's been diagnosed with autism and ADHD. If there's 2 individuals having a session, it could be completely miles apart, can't they, in terms of the content and the conversations. How do you tailor each coaching approach? How do you tailor that for the individual? We've asked that question. I think the what change would you like to see question is such a powerful one that potentially an individual hasn't even been asked that question to think, well, where do I actually want to get to in 4 weeks' time, 6 weeks' time, 6 months' time, whatever that may look like. To visualize that is really powerful, isn't it? I assume that then starts to shape, and say it's evaluated along the way. That then shapes that sort of tailored approach over the future sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can tell some people will naturally err to the more kind of emotional side, uncovering stuff that have been barriers for them, and some people will want a very, very practical, how am I going to will be really kind of challenged by organizing their work, so we'll work at that, and then by kind of default that will ease their anxiety. And it really depends on what's coming up from them, but it's really a sort of co-creation between them and me. And we measure success by whether we've achieved some of those goals, and we check in throughout the kind of course. So are we still working on the right things? Is this effective? So there'll also be a bit of goal setting along the way, and when we can sort of find co-create ways of kind of achieving those goals. If they're not working, we can tweak them. So it's funny, often I work with a kind of matrix that's borrowed from a thing called acceptance commitment therapy, or acceptance commitment coaching. So we kind of have a quadrant. So in this corner is your values, things that are important to you, what you want to, the process by which you want to work and live your life. So they're very often things about belonging, security, health. People might say wealth, but that's often very linked to security. And then over on in this quadrant down here is sort of things that trip you up. So there'll be procrastination, avoidance, low self-esteem and that sort of thing. And then up here will be the ways we would see you living in the world if you lived by your values. And over here is the stuff, procrastination, over socializing, under socializing, eating badly, not exercising. So we set goals to sort of move people in this direction towards the ways they would prefer to live their lives and to work at work. So along the way, we will sort of tweak and change those goals and they could be very, very tiny changes. So we're not thinking about great big sort of achievements. I'm going to be, the CEO by next month. We're thinking of the little things that will move you in the direction you want to go.
And I suppose that then brings that sort of sense of achievement, isn't it? That they are achievable goals, but they do.
Absolutely.
They're gonna. You need to work towards them, but
yeah.
that does help everything, doesn't it? You're achieving actually things that you're setting out to achieve along the way, and you're on that right path. Then.
Absolutely, that's exactly it. And then once the coaching intervention finishes, they can take that with them. They can continue to think, okay, here I go. I'm tripping myself up by doing this, but actually I want to be here. So how am I going to continue on that path?
Fantastic. The line manager conversations come up a couple of times, and I know we'll probably delve into the line manager conversation if there are particular issues there further down the line in the Q&A, but just a general conversation more around the co-coaching sessions. How do you involve the line manager should an individual need to change their approach to certain tasks?
Yeah, I mean, that will normally be at the beginning that they've been requested, a co-coaching session has been requested, or it could come up during the coaching intervention that actually a conversation with the line manager would be helpful. So on those occasions, I think it's really useful to have a kind of this about me or manual of me grids already completed. So it will be things like my strengths, my challenges, conditions in which I like to work, ways to communicate with me. How basically we've done the thinking about how a line manager can get the best out of a client. So, and there'll be a little statement, which is, I have ADHD, ASD. Mostly people at work really do want to do a good job. That's, and there might be barriers to do that. So we've already done the thinking, and then what I would do is invite the line manager, them to have to read this about me or manual of me document, and then that will be the basis for our conversations when we get into the co-coaching sessions. So it's sort of a way of enabling the communication between the client and the line manager in order that they can both do their best work together. So there will be an opportunity in that session for the line manager to sort of feedback about, it will again be a kind of three-way process between us to ensure better communication, better understanding, and how the line manager can be most supportive to get the best results from that member of their team.
Fantastic. We will touch back on the line manager conversation further down the line. You have an audience here to clear up anything. So if there are any misconceptions about workplace strategy coaching that you would like to clear up whilst you've got the floor.
Me. Okay. I suppose it's not teaching. I'm not there to teach anybody anything. I don't have to be an expert in your job. So you're the expert. So I think that's because so people sort of come and think, right, fix me. But actually, you're the one that's going to fix yourself. You are the expert, and I will support you with everything I've got. I think some people think, they think they come because it's an unusual situation. So very often it's come with a package of, they want access to the assistive tech, but coaching's a bit near. So I think it's seeing the value of the coaching and understanding that it's really led by you. There's nothing to be frightened of. what we do in the session is crafted by you and will be supported by me or your coach. So yeah, and give it a go. Come in with an open mind and a willingness to change, and it can be very, very effective, and often is, even I think the other thing is often the work takes place outside the session. It's when you go away and start trying things out, or your brain's chugging away, and actually that was quite a good idea, that I'm going to try that out, or I think those are the main things. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, my final question was, if anyone is listening and considering coaching for themselves, or if there are individuals that are listening in that have got that responsibility for arranging coaching for individuals in their organisation, what's the one thing you'd want them to take away from this morning?
That it's a worthwhile investment, I think, in yourself and in your team. That if we can sort of embrace the differences of our team and find out what their strengths are, it's a win-win, really. If you've got a happy team member, the more kind of well-adjusted you'll work, the more productive you'll be. I think that really.
Fantastic. That's great. Victoria, thank you very much. This is the point I'd like to introduce Hugh Newsom, who is joining us this morning. Hugh has been with his employer for over 25 years in software development, management and consulting with strategic accounts, and has very kindly agreed to share his journey of workplace strategy coaching currently, helping him thrive in his role. And we thought it'd be really useful to hear about his experience first half. So thank you, Hugh, for joining us. Very much appreciated.
Sure thing.
This morning, who is better to tell us what the sessions are all about? We've got the coach and we've got the coached, who will discuss what these sessions involve, how they've helped, and the impact that they have had. So I will hand over to Victoria and Hugh.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Well, this is a really lovely opportunity, I think. So Hugh and I have had 6 hours of coaching together.
Yep, something like that.
And we have a few more approved to come. So I think it'd be really nice if you shared what your preconceptions about coaching were and how these differed from the experience.
Right. Yes. Well, I mean, I did have an understanding of what coaching might be like because my son was diagnosed with ADHD and autism when he was at university, and we had quite a tough time with him, and we got a coach with him to try and just help him manage all of his problems. We didn't get the diagnosis of ADHD until he left, so I had some experience working on that front. So what would I say? Well, I think and then I had some CBT training with work, so that side of it. But what I liked with working with Victoria is not only was it working on tools and methods to get me my goal of essentially being more productive. That's what I wanted to be able to do. I mean, I'm aware of some of my strengths, but I wanted to be more productive. Don't procrastinate so much, and so on. But it was also the walking back of my life and thinking, well, okay, the reason I have ADHD is there is obviously the way my brain works, but also there can be impacts and things that happened in the past, and we walked over those, and that was very useful. Being a sort of mathsy, computer sciencey type person, I like to understand things and then work out mitigations, knowing that I am a bit different, and it's a case of how do you make it work to your advantage, and how do you get over the stumbling blocks, if you like?
Yeah, great, thank you. And in terms of the sort of co-creating practical mitigations, can you describe some of those and how they've worked for you?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm a bit of a lists fan, and the problem is the lists don't necessarily get done. I also am a big fan of mind maps. Try and because obviously being ADHD, my brain is thinking a million things at the same time. So trying to get things down is always a bit of a challenge. So mind maps are very useful. But one of the big breakthroughs I think we came up with was my office. So the office I'm currently in, which is blurred in the background, this is Office One, my original office, which as well as being working in the engineering software industry, I'm also a magician. So I have all my stuff in here, right? And it's so the first thing we did was, well, let's try and get you another office. So I work from home mainly. I do go into the office; it's local, but I don't actually work with anybody. We're in the transition, so eventually, when we move into our new office rather than this temporary one, I'll be going in more. But I needed somewhere, and working with Victoria, we put together this office that is work, right? And actually, my wife's got quite into it. She patrols to make sure that I haven't put anything in that's not work related. So that's good. That's good. And then it's a case of looking at how I can break my tasks down better. Try and don't try and do 100%. Maybe start with 5 or 10%. That kind of thing. Looking at my values, we did some work to look at my values so that I could kind of map those and see, how I'm making my goals in terms of what I believe in. And also, I do work with some very organized and procedural people, which I'll be honest, can be quite irritating because they're quite happy to keep on going even if they're about to jump off a cliff. And I'm always seeing the big picture because that's one of my advantages of having ADHD is you see things differently. So yeah. But it was my line manager who suggested I get some coaching, so that was good.
Great. And in terms of providing that safe space to reflect on your ADHD and the other challenges, some of the other mental health challenges you might have had in the past, can you describe how that's improved your self-awareness?
Yeah. So having the office has made a difference, definitely. But also in terms of a safe space, having a coach. Now, it's up to the individual, really. I guess I'm quite happy to talk about stuff. So I like investigating. So having that safe space to think and to talk is very useful. It's very useful. It's very important. And again, as I said earlier on, I'm a why and how, and also accepting yourself as you are. I mean, one of my big faults, like with many people with ADHD, is I interrupt people, right? And it's learning to kind of, because you're always worried you're going to forget. Well, I will forget, right? My point I'm going to make. So it's great. I mean, I like it. I mean, you understand yourself better. You do come up with strategies that you're not always effective, but even a 5% improvement is better than nothing. So it's about understanding yourself. I think it really helps.
Yeah. And in terms of understanding your strengths, I know that we talked a bit about that, but what other, have you acknowledged certain strengths that you have in a more refined and way than when we first started working together?
Well, I guess reflecting with yourself, I realized, and just over the last few weeks, right? I mean, I know I make things happen within the workplace because I can see. I'm also not frightened to pick up the phone and talk to somebody. So just joining the dots to make things happen is something. But also really reflecting on that and going, yeah, I actually do that. And in my own personal, private life, we do a lot of stuff. I make things happen. I'm the secretary of the local magic club, and since I took over 9 years ago, we've trebled our income. We're doing so much more because I take a punt. I go, oh, hang on, and then I'm always connecting the dots. So if I meet somebody, I'll talk to them about it, and I've got some pretty well known within the magic community folks to come and talk to us. So it's those are, and again, talking with yourself, you reflect on that. You think, oh yeah, no, that is true.
Great. And then from your perspective as a senior leader in your organisation, can you say what the benefits are of recognising and harnessing neuro distinctiveness in teams?
Oh gosh, yeah. I guess in some ways I've always been aware of of more of what I am maybe and how I am. And working, I live here in Cambridge. I work with a lot of very clever people, and you accept diversity, right? It's a natural thing, right? And people have places in an organization, and they can do amazing things. And it's again, all this is quite reflective, really, when you sit down and think about it. About yeah, the company I work for has been very good about this. They've realized. I think quite a lot of companies, like my son, my oldest son, he works for an engineering company, civil engineering company, and they're very much into the diversity of things, because they know that neurodiverse people will do things that other people can't do. They just know it's going to happen, right? So they're much more happy to do that. And I just think it needs to be, and also it means that you're more accepting of people as they are, as you see them. You're not too judgmental. It's like a paradigm shift, right? You kind of go, well, why is that person being like that? And then you stand back and go, oh, maybe you understand why. I think it makes you a lot more tolerant too, which is good, very important.
Fabulous, yeah. And lastly, we've got another 4 hours working together, and we've set some goals. So what would you hope to achieve in those remaining hours, and what would you like to do?
Well, yeah, again, I think I'll understand more about myself as we go through, but I really want to try and look at how I can remove some of my procrastination, because it doesn't make me happy. Procrastinating does not make you happy. Although I am a naturally happy person, it's a weight. So it is working on. There's so many tools now and ideas, that every little bit of getting more things. When you actually achieve something, you do get that endorphin rush. Even if when I've got something off my list, I kind of, you feel good, right? And it's how do you get into that state of mind? But also, like one of the things we've been doing is we've been putting, rather than just having lists, we've actually put blocking more time out in my calendar. Say, I will do this here, I will do this here, I will do this here. So they look like meetings, right? And then, and I'd say that's been partially successful. It's not 100% successful, but that's something we need to work on, right? So, but that is a great idea. I kind of did that a little bit before, but not as much since I started speaking with yourself. So, yeah, it's making that progress, adding those extra tools to my kind of armory, and basically getting more done. That's what I want to get out of it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Hugh. I'm looking forward to our remaining sessions together.
Absolutely, Victoria. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you both. Just jumping straight back in. I think that was brilliant, and I really appreciate this sort of open and honesty here. I thought that was really insightful for us. I found what was really interesting for us is how individualized that is towards you, and how you are working. But actually, a few hours in, and Victoria's asked you where do we want to go in the next few hours, is you completely steering the conversation, whether you were kind of aware of it or not. This is what I want to work on. This is where I want to be in 4 hours time, and that visualization, I assume, significantly helps with the remaining sessions, does it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we want. So in order to visualize that, you already sort of know how you're going to get there. You can't ask a question unless you sort of know the answer. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Andy. It's Hugh leading the way of things that he knows he needs to do, but also he has already got some solutions to how he's going to get there.
Fantastic. We talk about empowerment quite a lot on these webinars, and I think it absolutely does give that individual empowerment to put those processes in place to then be more productive. And we're talking about the value of organizations implementing coaching. You want your staff to be productive. You want them to as you alluded to earlier, Victoria, people just want to do the job. There's no real sort of downside to any of this, is there? It's really helping individuals just to do the job role going forward. Really insightful. Really appreciate it. David, many of you will know, I'm sure, there's a lot of familiar names that jump on the webinars. We very much appreciate it. David have been with Posturite. How long, Dave?
We're up to 4 years.
Wow. Dave helps a lot of organizations and has that background, 20 years experience within neurodiversity, assistive technology, putting processes in place for a lot of organizations. So what we wanted to do was just go through how we are helping a lot of organizations and what strategy coaching is through ourselves, because we do get asked this quite a lot. Yep. So hopefully this section will help. Dave, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Andy. So yeah, we wanted to talk today a little bit more behind obviously what the coaching is, but the mechanics of it, how we actually supply these services to our clients. And there's many different ways. Obviously, we've seen the discussion on one-to-one co-coaching this morning, but we're going to talk a little bit about how that can be actually processed and arranged with companies such as Posturite. And how it's commonly recommended. We also want to talk about the different formats it can be delivered in, the times and things like that, just to kind of get across how these can be booked in. Next slide, please, Tom. So initially one-to-one, you've heard this earlier on with Victoria, that it's actually person-driven. So it's a one-to-one coaching session where we're looking at the individual, what they're having challenges with, and then how we can support them throughout that session. So it's very centered to that individual. So we deliver them as a one-to-one basis, apart from when it's including the line manager. And basically, the individual will get a coach, and that coach will stay with that individual unless there are any issues or any challenges. We've found that very, very rare. And they get a good rapport initially with the first one, and then moving on to the other sessions, and they'll deliver them. They can be booked in many, many different guises, and we'll go through that on the next slides, guys. Next slide, please, Tom. So co-coaching, so this has been mentioned quite a bit. This is determined where an individual might need a little bit more support with the line manager moving forward. It can be so the line manager understands more about the different strategies that are being put in place. And then, yeah, basically the line manager can really support them. There's several different ways our clients take these guys. Some I'll book them all the sessions and actually sit in all of the sessions. Some will attend the first one and then maybe attend the last few sessions, and some will just jump in towards the end. This means that the line manager can choose not to obviously take their time up being in all the sessions, and they can jump in when it's more relevant for them. There's a double whammy there for the line manager. They're not only helping the individual moving forward, but they're learning about their conditions as well. This helps them then support other clients or other employees that they have. So they're getting a lot of awareness as well. It also helps a better relationship between the two, because sometimes that can be quite challenging, up to the point, so, some individuals might have been going on performance reviews and not known that they were struggling with the neurodiversity. So it can really help that relationship improve, and then they get the best out of that employee moving forward. Next slide, please, Tom. So how is it delivered? What medium do we deliver it by? So generally, most of our clients will go with remote these days. That's because we have obviously a lot of individuals working from home or in the office part-time or vice versa. So we find the flexibility of it being remote more friendly for the individual. They can take it at their flexibility. In addition to that, we can deliver them in person. Obviously, the remote ones are more selected, but we can actually go in person. We even have a flexibility on that. Maybe the first one, the individual can have the coach come along in person, and then following that, they can go with remote. Helps that initial relationship gaining. But like I said, most of the time we find that the sessions are actually delivered remotely. Next one, please, Tom. And then looking at the times that are booked. Now, this would be determined, which I'm going to talk about on the next slide, on the workplace needs assessment or for the preference of the actual employee themselves. We're quite flexible on the hours. Generally, it's a 2-hour slot. You can get quite a lot of information and a lot of work done within 2 hours. If you narrow it down to 1 hour, it can be quite tight, especially when you've got following sessions and you're actually reviewing the previous one, or even the initial session where actually setting a plan of action in place. That 2 hours would go very, very quickly. So generally we go with 2-hour slots. However, we do find some individuals find that too much. So we can actually do 1-hour slots as well, which makes it a little bit easier for them. Next one, please, Tom. And then basically, how are they requested? So this is basically where your employer or your line manager would come to us and say, we need to book these in. We have 2 ways. One is via a workplace needs assessment. These are commonly delivered by companies like Posturite, or Access to Work, if you utilise the Access to Work government funding. And what happens is they'll receive a workplace needs assessment, which, just to give you a quick overview for anybody who doesn't know what it is, it's basically where an assessor will determine where you're having any needs in the workplace. That might be assistive technology support tools. It might be training on that technology. It might be awareness training for your colleagues on your condition, or it might be awareness for yourself. But one of the main things that we generally get recommended is the actual coaching. And the reason for that is basically the individuals might have different working roles where they've got different types of challenges. We don't always use technology all day long, and some individuals might have a working role where they don't use technology. So having that coaching is probably one of the key tools that is recommended. Now, within the assessment, they'll actually determine how many they believe you should have, and then that's recommended. And you'll see that come through on a report at the end of the actual assessment. And it'll also come through from Access to Work on a report detailing why they're recommending these sessions and how many. Now, we have many clients who take a few of those sessions at once and then see and determine if they're still helpful. Like Victoria said, you might only have 3 sessions and then they determined it and do you need more. Some people find that that's enough. So that, again, can be slightly flexible. And then we get clients where they'll just book them all in as a full bank. The ways you can additionally request it is also you can basically just ask for coaching. And basically we have a online booking system. So you can go on our website and request information on booking it. But if you're already a client with Posturite, you'll have an online booking link. And this will be available to somebody in your team or somebody in your work, one of your colleagues, maybe your HR team or the health and safety team. They'll have a link and they can go in there and book any of our assessments, but also the coaching is available to book directly in there. And that makes things nice and easy. It's all digital. It's all delivered that way. Then our team will get in touch with the coach and arrange times for you to join up with that coach, and then those are booked in. Next slide, please, Tom. So before we move on to questions, guys, I just wanted to mention, obviously, when they are booked in and they're delivered, we generally book them in every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depending on the individual. We try not to put them too close together because you're being given strategies to utilize in work and you need that time in between to actually use those strategies. So it's key that you get a bit of space between them. We definitely wouldn't recommend booking them within 1 week. We would stretch it out minimum of 2 weeks, sometimes more. Okay, so again, that's flexible for your requirements on your diary and calendar as much as is the coaches. And then we can review at the end of those sessions whether any more are needed or whether you've got all the full support that you require. Okay, so I think we're going to switch over to questions and answers now, Andy, for the full panel.
A lot of questions around line managers. I've got one that, well, I've got 3 really that are going to be relatively linked together here. And the first one is probably aimed at yourself, Victoria, if that's okay. Is how to address perceived personality differences between staff and managers. We'd all love to get on with our line manager. We fully appreciate not everybody does, unfortunately. But obviously that sparked quite a few questions within this area this afternoon. So how do we address perceived personality differences between individuals and their line managers?
Yeah, it's always a tricky one. I mean, you don't have to like each other, you just have to work with each other. I think that's a sort of crucial thing to understand. And if your interests align in that, everybody wants to do their best work at work, that's the starting point, isn't it? So I think with that in mind and that the context, what I've talked about, these manuals of me that a coach can work on in the one-to-one sessions, which go through the best ways of getting the performance out of the team member you're line managing. So I think that's a good way of communicating. Obviously the co-coaching sessions, and like I say, very often it's just not quite understanding, that the person you're managing might just work in a slightly different way. So I think the more that you can understand that as a line manager, and the more that the team member can communicate their needs, and the more supportive that relationship will be, the better working relationship can be created. So it's basically improving the communication between the two, enabling the client to advocate better for themselves, to be more self-aware about what their needs are. So I think, there's certainly work that can be done in those situations.
There may be similar answers here. The most voted for question within the Q&A box is very relevant. Is how can co-coaching be approached if the line manager is reluctant?
Well, that's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if they're actually refusing to do it, that is a problem. Now, you've got a breakdown of a relationship, a working relationship, which is, it is problematic. But I would suggest that, if the end game is to, it's not necessarily to like each other, but it's to get the best work out of each other, then entering into those co-coaching environments is the best way forward, or to do it via creating an about me document or a manual of me document. But you certainly have to communicate, or that relationship isn't going to improve. I suppose at that point you might need to involve other departments in the organization if the relationship has broken down so badly. But we would hope that coaching can do something to support that.
And on a similar theme, while we stick with the line manager's theme and potentially move on, what strategies are encouraged when it's the line manager or even wider work systems which are worsening individuals' well-being? Maybe a specific question, but one we've been sent in previously to today.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose some of those questions go beyond my remit. So sometimes systems in workplaces are more or less, supportive of these, of accepting a distinct teams and working relationships. So I think maybe organisations themselves can sort of learn about the benefits of embracing neurodiversity. And I think maybe, HR departments certainly have a place, and occupational health departments in organisations will also have a place here. So it's embracing the differences within your team and providing spaces and opportunities for better communication. There's no single answer to that question. It's very contextual, isn't it?
It is, and probably one for me to just mention, if there are sort of specific scenarios within the questions, very specific, then probably the best thing for us is to reach out to you via email, sort of individually, to answer the questions, if that's okay. So if we don't get to your questions, apologies. We will absolutely come back to you. This is a question again that has been upvoted within the chat. As we continue to build more inclusive environments for neurodivergent individuals, how do we ensure that those who don't identify with a specific label also feel seen and supported without unintentionally creating a sense of exclusion, both generally and in the workplace?
I mean, sorry if shall I feel this from my perspective? I think, yes, it just generally embracing an understanding of the different ways people work. So it's not sort of focused on a particular group of people who are, diagnosed with a neurodifference. It's sort of everybody has a different way of working. So if you can encourage understanding about that across your team, then that's a bit of a win, I'd say. And also, I think, often you can access this support without having a formal diagnosis of anything. So you might not want a diagnosis, you might have not reached the threshold for a certain diagnosis. Again, with all these kind of boxes that we've got, as we all know, there's sort of comorbidities or common traits that are shared amongst ADHD people, dyslexic people, ASD people, and also those that are not formally diagnosed, of course. So I think it's the context you're working in, the kind of organizational culture and how it's orientated towards these differences.
And actually, I mean, we discussed this in our last webinar, which is on the website, around the diagnosis process for ADHD is in some areas been closed, some areas 8, 9, 10 years. What does an individual do? They don't just wait eight years before they then look into any kind of support that they may need. They of course may not need support, but so that diagnosis isn't there yet, is it? But they can't sit still for 8 years waiting to get a diagnosis and then start to look into any kind of additional support that they may need. So yeah, I think removing that sort of diagnosis is something that people come to us with quite a lot, and just put those processes in place. I'm just refreshing my screen. Is coaching available for those who are, for example, autistic and ADHD? A lot of what I hear about coaching normally focuses one condition and not for those of us who have two neurodivergent conditions coexisting together.
Yeah. Well, I think I've just sort of addressed that to some extent, that you know, you've met one person with dyslexia, you've met one person with dyslexia, and you know, the fact is they will share traits or, you know, of other, you know, the thing about the diagnosis, they're all made up, you know, they're boxes to fill. But you know, I would say that most people who coach in this context will fully understand that you know, you're dealing with an individual who may have more than one diagnosis. They may have just been quite happy. I mean, from my personal perspective, I think I've probably got traits of ADHD along with my dyslexia, but I don't feel a compulsion to get a diagnosis for that. But if I was in a coaching space, you know, I would expect that the coach will be able to be aware that, you know, there are fuzzy boundaries between these things.
And this is one probably from a different angle, really. Where I've just found it. How would you offer coaching to individuals who do not recognize their neurodiversity, but as a manager, it is quite clear? So obviously looking at it from probably another angle, really, that if it is a line manager, and I suppose this is around those conversations that we have of how does potentially it get brought up, opening up. But if it's a line manager that feels that an individual may need benefit from coaching and they may be either reluctant or unaware, is there anything that you would advise here?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, that's okay, Victoria. Sorry, we're just firing them all at you. I'll get Dave involved in a second.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so I mean, it's a tricky one because you don't want to sort of out people, do you? But if a manager thinks that one of their team will benefit from coaching, I think that's the way in. It's like, this is on offer for you. Why don't you take it and you know, and explore it, and we'll support you. And you don't have to get a diagnosis. It's just, you know, an offer from the organisation to give you some support. So I think it's sort of the sensitivity in handling that conversation. But I think, you know, people do come to me without diagnosis, or they, you know, certainly with ADHD, because you've mentioned the challenges of getting that diagnosis, Andy. I mean, it's quite easy to diagnose dyslexia because it's a different sort of process. It's very measurable. With ADHD, it's not so much, and also there are, you know, huge waiting lists. So and with the general context of these things being more and more talked about, I think, you know, there is, you know, it's become less of a stigma, hasn't it, generally, about sort of going down those routes. But yeah, it's the sensitivity of the conversation, and maybe a suggestion, well, we will offer you this, it's an opportunity for you, go and explore, you know, your best ways of working and how you can overcome, you know, what I perceive to be some of the issues here.
That's great. We have a lot of conversation with clients that talk about giving individuals multiple channels of and opportunities to have that conversation, and not just an appraisal every 6 months where then you've got to wait another 6 months to maybe have that conversation. And with different people, it just does give that individual a lot of multiple ways to potentially have that conversation. There is a question about, I don't want to give away any of your trade secrets here, Victoria, but procrastination is one that has been listed a few times and was mentioned earlier. What tool or methods do you use for procrastination improvements? Easy for me to say.
Yeah, it's a biggie, isn't it? So first of all, it's sort of recognizing what it is. So it's a freeze response you're overwhelmed, and some of these tasks become monsters. They just, they sometimes they're the sort of just the boring bit because it's not exciting. So I think the important thing is acknowledging it, breaking the task down. So we've discussed about getting the easy wins, the little dopamine hit you've got from, okay, so it might be a report you have to write. It's sort of like you've scheduled in your monster task for a certain time of day. I'm going to look at those things that really, make me go into freeze, and I'm going to open the document and I'm going to write the date, and then you leave it. So it can be as simple as that. So basically you're just turning something that feels impossible into something possible and getting little wins. But again, that will depend on the individual, the nature of the work, but it's the same principle. And then it's understanding what happens with procrastination. So it's a thing called the procrastination cycle. You can Google it. There are lots of different models and infographics about it. And there are lots of, if you're trying this at home, there's an app called Goblin that will break down tasks for you, and then you can tick a little box when you've done a bit, and that just goes, so it's turning something into a positive experience, into achievements, however incremental that has to be.
Fantastic. Yeah, I leave my personal phone in another room. That absolutely is a win for me.
There's all
You
the
find your own
distraction,
ways. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how are you displacing that, those bad feelings about that task, and how much better you'll feel if you start it even in a tiny way.
So yeah, I learned that a long time ago. Sorry, Victoria, what was the name of the app again? We've just
Goblin. The other thing is we haven't talked about is parallel working, body doubling. So people are probably aware of this, and it's great to set it up, particularly when we all started working at home, is to have a buddy you work with. So you go, what's your task, the one you really don't want to do, and you co-work. You basically parallel work. So there's loads of stuff online about parallel working and why it works. And it's a great thing. I had a client who introduced it to her organization in a presentation, and it's been adopted, by them as a kind of system you can sign up for, and been very effective for them.
Fantastic. There's a couple of questions on performance reviews, which sometimes these pathways come via performance reviews. There is one in the chat, and one we were sent to previously. What advice do you have for people who have been given a poor performance review despite having an ADHD diagnosis? That's how that was worded, that was sent in to us previously.
Yeah, it's a challenge that you do quite frequently get people who are coming because they're already on a performance review. But you'd hope that, I think, again, it's reframing what's happening for you. So, there is a default, I'm in trouble, I'm useless, whatever it is, the kind of things that are going round and round. But actually a performance review should be a way of supporting you, rather than a disciplinary process. So I think with those situations, you really lean into a strengths-based approach and a solutions-based approach. So, what are you bringing into this team? What have you got to where are your strengths? And then going through, so I've been through the performance goals, and we'll work together. I will be a buddy to, or the coach will be a buddy to support you through that process. And then at some point there might be some use in having a co-coaching session to, things are really kind of increasingly a barrier. But it's a tricky way to start, but it's certainly, with the right approach, we can turn these things into successes.
Fantastic. I think we're still directing a lot of these to yourself, Victoria, I think. So apologies, Dave, while you sat there waiting in the wings. Another question. I understand that people will want to advocate their needs to their team. What if these impact negatively on other members of the team, or the team cannot accommodate? So maybe looking at the wider wider team.
Again, with the right management and leadership, you're seeing a team as just that, a kind of ecosystem of strengths and challenges. So yes, I mean, it is always a challenge, and very often people go, well, I don't want to have my work taken away because that will then land on so-and-so's desk. So I can understand how, that feels very challenging. But I think if we're looking at the team as a whole functioning body rather than as individuals, that will certainly help there. And also, I mean, I think Dave might talk about them. We do have a legal responsibility to supporting people in the workplace. So, you know, you might get people who have got ADHD who will do, you know, 100% of the work in 20% of the time on their good days. So I think it's just sort of looking at your team as a whole, supporting people who are struggling in certain areas, recognizing their strengths in different areas, and maybe sort of aligning the strengths and you know, their trade-offs within the team. But yeah, I think that will often come with good leadership and good management.
Fantastic.
We also offer basically training for the teams as well, Andy. So we basically train the colleagues on their condition, not singling out the individual, but then they're getting a good awareness of why they are, you know, working differently, thinking differently. So it gets a better rapport with the team. So that's another solution that can help.
Fantastic. There is a question further down. I have seen it around how many sessions or the frequency of sessions that would be recommended. We talk about the sort of not one size fits all approach, but how is it determined, or who decides how many sessions an individual may potentially need, and is that reviewed along the way?
So I think I mentioned it in my section, Andy, that an assessor will generally recommend the amount of sessions. They'll look at the needs that the individual has in that assessment, and then they'll recommend a figure that should hopefully cover supporting them. Some clients prefer to recommend less and then have a review, and then basically add more. I think Hugh's having additional sessions with Victoria as well. So sometimes they do need extra sessions, and it's just approaching that as to why they need it, and then basically requesting those extra sessions. On occasions, you'll get access to work over recommended, so that you might end up with 30 sessions when you only need 20 or 10. So sometimes you're not going to take up all the sessions. So generally it's an assessor who would determine it, or it might be even yourself with the coach. So you've had some sessions, you feel like you need more, and the coach can help you with guidance on how many more you might need and determine that.
Fantastic. Hugh, we do have a question for yourself if you are still around. It's an interesting one in terms of your journey, really. Would Hugh have sought coaching if it wasn't his workplace that suggested it?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. It was just a case of serendipity. I mean, as I said, with my son, we paid for it privately. So, you know, I'd been through that experience and seen the value of that. So yeah, I think I would have paid for it myself. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think that's interesting. It's having that awareness, and we've done a previous webinar before. It was around ADHD, and essentially the individual that spoke got a diagnosis because her son was diagnosed. So she learned more around ADHD because her son went through the process, and we're finding that more and more, really. I think because the conversation is still a long way to go, but getting better within sort of education system.
Yeah.
That
So
it is prompting that higher up to the next generation up, isn't it?
yeah, what I would say is, yeah, I mean, obviously, I thought I had ADHD, and during COVID times, I had an assessment with the NHS, and they said, oh, it's nothing too bad, blah blah blah, right? And then my son had this, you know, similar problems. We always thought he had ADHD, and we ended up getting him diagnosed privately, which again is unfortunately quite expensive. And then so I thought, well, this is definitely me. Definitely me. So I rang up the company that did that, and they said, well, send me all the details from what the NHS said, and they messaged me back say, you have been formally diagnosed with ADHD. They should be doing something. So I rang them up, and they said, oh yeah, you're on the waiting list. And they rang me up about 3 months ago. So I was on the waiting list for about 4 years before they took me 6 months to get the appointment, and then 4 years for them to come back to me. So that's one of the depressing things, which is why it's good that companies are getting more involved now.
Yeah, fantastic. Couple more where at a time, and I appreciate those that have stuck with us. This may be one. Just looking generally, how do you reconcile client-led with the needs of the organization? So we do make it that tailored approach, but how does that then integrate with the needs of the organization. Maybe one for yourself, Victoria, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think, from my perspective, you've got to remember who's paying the bill. So we do, the focus is workplace performance. And I think that's sort of, the context in which the coaching takes place. But, we will deal with the other stuff that comes up with the view to creating a whole person who can show up to work and do their best work, because, generally that's what people want to do. So I think that's for me to keep it on track, but people will understand the context of the work. All coaching has a context. Actually, while I'm here, I think there's just reviewing that answer to the sort of stuff around the line manager or performance reviews. I touched on it briefly, but it might have got lost. Anxiety, low self-esteem, and stress will only make all this stuff much worse. It literally shuts down those bits of your brain functioning that you need to perform well at work. So I think if line managers and teams can keep that in mind, that sort of putting somebody on disciplinary processes, which may be necessary, we do understand that there are situations when a client is not able to perform in their job, but if we can have a strengths base, what can we do, positive approach and solutions approach to these issues, you're much likely to get a better result than putting somebody into stress, because it will all get much worse.
Fantastic. We're going to finish on one more, and apologies. There's a lot of questions that are sort of specifically scenario based around the individual. So we are going to reach out to everyone individually, if that's okay, via email. We'll finish on this one because we can't go webinar without access to work being mentioned. Do coaches sometimes work alongside access to work support workers? We do support a lot of organizations that have had an access to work assessment where we can provide the coaching that has been recommended, even if we're not on the recommended report, because they can't list everyone. So we do a lot of sessions where we are doing workplace strategy coaching on the back of an access to work assessment. They have potentially been recommended a support worker. Do we work alongside the support workers as well, Victoria? Something you've been experiencing?
Sorry, work alongside?
A support worker. So if access to work have recommended a support worker with an individual on a sort of monthly, annual basis, have you ever worked alongside any kind of support workers with specific strategy coaching, or could you?
I said yes, absolutely. You can work alongside. I mean, all the information I get has to be come from the client, so there's a confidentiality about what I know and what I don't know. But yes, totally up for co-working with others in a supportive role to help the client, to support the client.
Fantastic. Time has crept up on us, so this just leads me to say thank you, Victoria, to David, to Hugh, and thank you to everyone that has joined us today. A lot of information. We will reach out to everyone individually as well who has been in contact with us, so thank you very much. Please stay tuned for other webinars. We are running webinars on a monthly basis in September. The enablement team will be back in October, where we talk about the menopause, so hopefully you will join us for that. Any queries, please do get in touch. Thank you, and hopefully see you all soon. Thank you.